Libra, the week of July 26th to August 1st, 2026, delivers its heaviest weather directly into the part of your chart you know best. Partnership. Saturn stations exactly retrograde on July 26th at 14 degrees Aries, joining Neptune, already retrograde there, in your 7th house of partnerships, your natural domain. On top of that, a full moon lands in Aquarius on July 29th, conjunct Pluto, in your 5th house of romance and self-expression, forming an exact opposition to the Sun's rare conjunction with Jupiter in your 11th house of friends and community. The lunar nodes shift axis this same week too. It's an unusual week for you specifically, because so much of the year's biggest astrological weather is landing right on the house that governs the very thing your sign is known for. This kind of concentration rarely happens by coincidence for any single sign in a given week, and it's worth taking the coincidence seriously rather than treating it as background noise. Let's go through what all of this actually means for your money, your relationships, and your energy, using the real sky, not generic guesswork. Money and career moved with genuine clarity this week thanks to Mercury sitting in Cancer, your 10th house of career and public standing. After weeks of fog, you're able to think clearly again about your professional direction. And conversations with superiors or clients should go more smoothly than they have recently. This is a good week to actually schedule the conversation you've been putting off. Since Mercury's clarity here won't last indefinitely and the words are likely to come easier now than they will once the retrograde shadow fully clears. If there's a professional decision you've been deliberately postponing, weigh the two sides once more this week and then choose, rather than letting the deliberation itself become the delay tactic Libra sometimes leans on when a choice feels genuinely close. Mars in Gemini, meanwhile, sits in your 9th house of beliefs, travel, and higher learning, adding real motivation to pursue further education, a certification, or an opportunity that involves expanding your expertise rather than simply maintaining what you already know. This is a good week to actually enroll in something or book the trip connected to professional growth, rather than continuing to think about it abstractly. Libra can spend a long time weighing options evenly before committing to one. Mars here is specifically nudging you to just pick a direction and move. Early in the week, while the moon sits in Capricorn, your 4th house of home, use the steadier mood there to handle a domestic task before the bigger midweek events arrive. Since your attention is likely to be pulled outward toward career and partnership once Wednesday hits. Relationships are where the real weight of the week lands, and it's worth taking seriously. Saturn stationing exactly retrograde on July 26th, joining Neptune already retrograde there, in your 7th house of partnerships, is one of the more significant transits of the year specifically for you, since partnerships are your natural territory. Saturn entered Aries back in February, opening a new cycle around commitment and structure in how you relate to others. And this retrograde marks the first real pause to honestly assess what that cycle has built, or what it's revealed as built on less solid ground than you'd like. A station presses harder than a passing transit, since the planet appears to hang nearly motionless in the sky, and with Neptune sitting in the same house, this week's pressure is layered. Saturn wants real structure and honesty, while Neptune keeps softening the picture just enough to make avoidance tempting. You may find it genuinely hard this week to tell whether a relationship's foundation is as solid as it feels, or whether you've been seeing it through a softer lens than reality warrants. Precisely because Libra's natural instinct is to smooth over friction in the name of harmony rather than name it directly. This isn't a reason to panic or end anything abruptly. It's a reason to look honestly, with structure, rather than assumption, at what's actually there, asking a direct question about commitment, expectations, or the future, even if the answer risks disrupting the peace you'd rather maintain. Libra's usual approach of waiting for the right, gentle moment to raise something difficult can quietly turn into never raising it at all. This week's sky specifically favors just asking, even imperfectly, over continuing to wait for conditions that feel comfortable enough. Given that this retrograde lasts until December, whatever surfaces this week is the opening chapter of a longer conversation, not something that needs full resolution by Saturday. Pay attention specifically to whether you've been keeping the peace by quietly absorbing more compromise than your partner has, since that pattern is exactly the kind of thing a stationing Saturn tends to surface without warning. Energy and health this week show up through a question about where your joy actually comes from. The full moon on July 29th lands in your 5th house of romance and self-expression, conjunct Pluto, in exact opposition to the Sun-Jupiter conjunction in your 11th house of friends and community. This asks you to weigh personal joy and creative or romantic fulfillment against your investment in group belonging and social approval, which is a particularly Libra kind of question, since you're prone to finding safety in being liked by the group rather than in pursuing what genuinely lights you up personally. Pluto's presence at this full moon adds real depth, a creative pursuit or romantic desire you've quietly downplayed because it didn't fit the image your social circle expects of you, may surface with unusual force this week, asking to actually be taken seriously rather than shelved again for the sake of consensus. Notice this week whether your creative or romantic choices are actually yours, or shaped by what your social circle would approve of. And don't be surprised if the answer is more uncomfortable than you'd expect from a sign that prides itself on knowing what it likes. If a creative idea or a romantic interest has been quietly dismissed because it doesn't fit the image your friends expect of you, this week is a good time to at least admit that to yourself, even before you decide what to do about it. There's a longer story underneath this single week worth naming briefly. The lunar nodes shifting onto the Aquarius-Leo axis lands the North Node in your 5th house of personal creativity and romance, and the South Node in your 11th house of friends and groups. For the next 18 months, your growth edge lies in genuine, personal self-expression, even when it doesn't have group consensus behind it, rather than the more familiar comfort of belonging and being liked. This is a real stretch for a sign that tends to build identity through relationship and consensus rather than solo declaration, and it will likely feel less comfortable than the alternative for some time. This week's full moon is the opening note of that longer chapter, arriving with unusual force precisely because it's echoing a theme the nodes will keep returning to over the coming months. So, here's where this actually leaves you, Libra, heading into August. Saturn and Neptune are asking you to look honestly at the real structure underneath your closest partnership. The full moon is asking whether your joy is actually yours or borrowed from group approval. Neither question needs a dramatic answer today, just honest attention. If you find yourself wanting to smooth over what surfaces this week rather than sit with it, that instinct itself is worth noticing. It's precisely the pattern this whole week is quietly asking you to loosen. If this reading resonated with you, hit like and subscribe.